So obviously, thank you everyone for joining and welcome to the next instalment of the live series Roundtable events, which is obviously the series that connects some of the world's top engineering leaders to engage in a discussion on hot topics. So my name's Jamie. Hopefully you know by now that I specialise in recruiting across the JavaScript and TypeScript market across the Nordic region. As a business, Amicus also cover Golang, Python and Rust positions throughout the US and Europe. So today I'm delighted to be joined by 4 engineering leaders from the Nordic region, and the event that we're going to be covering today is how to successfully interview and hire an experienced engineer. So as I mentioned, we've got 4 people with us today, so I'm going to go around and give everyone a brief introduction. So first of all, we've got Peter Bernhardsson. He's the engineering manager for Avanza Bank currently, which is one of Sweden's largest banks with over 1 million customers. So how are you, Peter? Are you okay?
Yeah, I am good.
Good, man. Glad to hear. Secondly, we've got Martin Hobert, who is the Senior Engineering Manager at Lego Group, who I'm sure you've all heard of before. You okay, Martin?
Definitely. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much for joining. We also have Raphael Joachim, I think I said that right, who's Head of Front End for Helicon Technologies, who are a software business that builds solutions for businesses in the energy sector. You okay, Raphael?
Yep, happy to be here and meet you all.
You too. And last but definitely not least, we have Nick Borghaus, who's the Head of Development at Hello Retail, and formerly the CTO at Tame as well. Are you okay, Nick?
Yeah, good. Happy to meet everyone, even though it's dark outside.
Thanks a lot for joining. I really appreciate it. So, Nick, while we're with you, I'll get you to do the first introduction, if that's okay. So if you could just give us like a brief kind of run through in terms of your career all the way up to the point where you are now and what your current role looks like.
Yeah, sure. So very briefly then, before joining Hello Retail, I was in a startup company for 3.5 years, 3 years as a CTO, where we did event technology. There's been through quite a few crunches because COVID happened. So we kind of had to pivot the entire thing from event planning to virtual events. Doing that, I was leading up the engineering and product department, which we scaled from being around, 5 people to, in the end, the company was 50. And then after being there for 3 years, I joined Hello Retail, where we focus on e-commerce solutions for web shops. And here I oversee our data science, product, and engineering efforts, basically. So yeah, I think that's very brief.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you very much. Raphael, we can come to you next. So as mentioned before, you're head of front end at Helicon at the moment. Would you mind again just giving us a brief run through of your career to date and what you do at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I've been mainly focused on front end since I started developing. I think that's like 13 years ago or something. And for the past maybe 7 years, I've been in leadership positions. So before I moved to Stockholm, I was head of front end for a financial communication agency, and then I joined H&M as a senior consultant. And then Instabox was the tech lead for one of the internal teams building the operational system and apps. And now at Helicon, head of front end again. And mainly I'm working with mentoring, but also hands-on coding and kind of setting the direction of the front end within the company.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Martin, who's actually joining us from a tech conference today in Aarhus. So thanks a lot for making the effort to join. Would you mind doing the same as the other guys and just giving us a run through of yourself so far?
Yeah, definitely. So I started out straight out of school with my own company, developing websites for smaller clients, etc. And throughout the years, I've been helping different startups get onto their boots, and then joined different tech businesses as a consultant, done a lot of e-commerce. A few years ago, I joined Salling Group, the biggest retailer in Denmark, where I've been managing the front-end department, and now recently joining Lego Group as well, as a senior engineering manager. Besides that, I do a lot of community work around the development scene in Denmark. So most people probably see me out there at the different conferences like tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to hear. And Peter, obviously I'm Avanza Bank at the moment, but got a career as well for a while before that. Would you mind just talking us through that?
Yeah, so I've been at Avanza for maybe 4 years now. Actually started as an agile coach and transitioned over to an engineering manager position during this summer. So pretty new in the role, but and my background is as an agile coach as well. So I've been actually doing like agile coaching for maybe 8 years ahead of this, both at like small startups and even larger banks, I would say, than Avanza. Avanza is actually pretty small in Sweden compared to like the 4 big ones that we have. So yeah, that's pretty a short summary, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we'll just kick straight into the topic then. It's one that I wanted to discuss because it's something that, I mean, I've been doing recruitment for 5 years and it's always a kind of hot topic. We're hosting another event soon, which is based around hiring junior engineers, which got me kind of thinking, there's so many senior engineers and experienced engineers out there, and everyone's got different preferences in terms of how they should be interviewed, and from a company perspective, how they should interview the person as well. So I think what I was kind of keen to understand from everyone is in terms of your personal experiences so far. So everyone in this room has been a senior engineer previously. And also, just for the sake of clarity, I'm classing a senior engineer as someone who has 3-4 years of experience as a minimum. So somebody who knows what they're doing a little bit more. What have your experiences been in the past, and what would you say is your kind of favorite interview process that you've been through, in terms of how it went, what the stages were, and what the kind of company got from you during that process? Anyone feel this is a bit of a free for all now, so anyone can jump in if they've got something to mention.
Okay, I can start. So I think it's been pretty hard finding like good engineers in general. But I've been doing a lot of interviews, and it's very like it's rare that we bump into someone that says like, okay, this is like a very good find, and really want to do everything to have that. It's very uncommon to come across kind of these profiles. But for me, I think that the best process I kind of experiment with for hiring engineers is, and I'm talking from a technical point of view here, because there's also the behavioral and culture fit and all that stuff. But from a technical point of view, I think the best results I got from having an assignment that's not too large, and then you have a follow-up discussion that you go through that assignment and you use it as a base for the discussion. So you can then discuss the trade-offs. Why did you go with this way instead of that way, or what would have done to improve it? So it gives you a lot of material that you can use in the follow-up discussion, and also it gives you like really good insight into how that person really does stuff, which is pretty valuable in that phase.
What would you say is like the size of that assignment that you give to people? Like how many hours? Because I've heard some complaints from different engineers.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
like I don't want to put in too much time into something I don't know if it's going to pan out or.
Yeah, so it is tricky. So you gotta be. I mean, you gotta find the sweet spot, right? Because if it's a bit large, then you might push some people off. But if it's too small, then you might not get the benefit you want out of it, and it's just a waste of time. But I think something that takes a couple of days, I would say, would because not full time, but like if you work on it a couple of hours for a couple of days, then that should be fine. Yeah, because longer than that, people usually are going through multiple processes, and they don't want to kind of like they don't have the capacity all the time to do multiple large projects. But then it gotta be again, the right size, so we actually get the benefits out of it.
Yeah. So essentially trying to kind of I guess not judge people, but kind of assess people more on their like approach to problem solving and how they actually go through things, which I guess is what you get from the follow-up conversation that you have with them to see why they chose to go down a certain avenue or to use a certain technology or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious, like how much do you guys put into actually solving the assignment rather than like the discussion that follows?
Yeah,
so like what's the most important part, do you think?
Yeah, the assignment doesn't matter at all. I mean, the goal is not to do what the assignment is asking you to do. Like the goal is to see how you thought about solving those problems and how you tried approaching them and solving them. So that actually the discussion that comes after it
Yep.
is the most important part, I would say.
It's very important to create this foundation for the whole topic, and then taking the conversation there from the assessment, maybe taking a few key points from it to start off the conversation, but then you can completely divert off it into different topics that are more
exactly.
relevant to the engineering role that you're looking for.
Definitely. And also I would say it acts like as a sort of a filter phase, because if something like is really obvious, then you don't want to, and you feel that you don't want to continue with the process and kind of invest the rest of the time with that candidate, then you can do that. And sometimes it's really obvious that okay, the discussion isn't really gonna give us much more value than we have now.
Yeah.
And what just to sort of ask so many questions, just curious, but so like when would you say when do you do this assignment? Is it like the first step or the second step or like the third step, or when would you say that it's appropriate to have this?
I've actually done it at multiple different steps depending on the candidate as well. At Lego we usually do it before the third interview.
Okay.
At Talent Group I would do it at the second interview. So it very much differs.
Yeah.
Do you think it differs? Sorry, do you think it differs as well on the seniority of the role? I mean, I see the need for juniors, right? Is very hard to assess because they have usually no prior experience, right? They don't have any. I mean, sure, you can talk about the projects they've made, but they will usually be like student or hobby projects, so not real life things. So I just want to hear you guys' input on, like, do you adjust the assignment based on like the level we're hiring at? Because I would definitely throw an assignment at somebody that's junior coming in, right? Because we've all experienced that people call themselves developers, and then they haven't actually done a lot of development work, or at least not what you expect for the role.
Yeah, definitely. It has to be relevant for the role, and for the senior positions, you might not be giving the assessment based on the code that they actually output from it. It's more about their communication skills and the way that they can explain a topic to you based on this project. So it's not something that they have rehearsed beforehand to know especially amount of information about one topic, but it's actually based on the assignment that they got.
Because in my experience thinking about because I guess the interview process is a lot about not hiring the right person, right, or a mishire, or at least trying to avoid that. In my head, I mean, I think we do some pretty advanced stuff here at Hello Retail, but a lot of the stuff is also not that advanced. So it's more about actually being able to communicate about the problems I see as a problem, and people being able to understand why things are important or what is important, right? We have a lot of customers with we run on their website, right? So if we're down or if there's a bug in our system, then it affects basically how much money they earn that day. So they obviously can get very, very stressed about that. So when a task comes in, it's important that our engineers understands, okay, how important is this, or is this more important than what I've been doing? So I tend to try and assess that as much as possible. It's mostly been that and not so much the technical skill, because in the end you can teach that, or we do it in some weird way compared to some other company or whatever, right? We all have our weird things, or it's dangerous to go alone in that area of the code base items. So it's more the communication and how people I see as a really key, especially in seniors, conveying things. I personally have a computer science background, so I don't feel I'm too lost, but I still need to understand it to communicate it further into the organization, or if we have to align, right? Just internally in the team.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult thing, isn't it, with a senior engineer or someone that you bring in who's experienced, because you've got to strike the balance between, you're ultimately going to be paying them a senior salary and they're coming into that kind of part of the team where they're expected to maybe not hit the ground running straight away, but that they're not going to need too much hand-holding, because if you could afford to do that, you just keep hiring juniors and training them up, but also making sure that you don't bring in the wrong type of person or someone who can write great code but is going to be bad for the culture of the team or cause, real upset within the team structure that you've got already. Just on the point about technical challenges, because I knew that this is kind of where the conversation was going to go, because they're such a hot topic and they're a bit of a love-hate thing with a lot of people. What would you say to the people that get to 4 or 5 years in their career, maybe in their third job, are obviously very talented, and they say, you wouldn't ask a builder to build something for you to prove that they're right for the project? But what's your kind of approach to that response that people come up with?
I mean, for me, there is no way to know. Especially in our field. I mean, some people can have really good communication skills. Maybe they can present themselves. Maybe they know how to speak, but they don't really know how to solve the problem. So for me, having a test like that kind of makes it a little bit easier to see if they can actually solve the problems or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about abstract problem solving problems, but something practical, something related to our day-to-day job and related to the type of projects that we're working on. So you can also see how relevant they are, or if they're lacking something that you would need to teach them, then that when you hire, that, okay, so this is a really good candidate, but he's missing these 2 points, and we would need to kind of do something about it. Have a program, maybe I don't know, give him some time to get used to them. I don't know, whatever. But kind of your next steps. Especially in our field, there are so many different ways to do the same thing. There's so many different technologies. So many different type of projects. So people can be working for 5, 6 years, but only on a specific type of project. And maybe that didn't give them the chance to actually learn a lot of stuff. Maybe they were doing the same thing for those 7 years.
Yeah.
So just having a lot of years on your resume doesn't really mean that or you have the relevant skills to this specific job. And this is where kind of the test and the discussion come into play.
Yeah. I think for me it's I mean, I'm probably, if it's a scale of the camps, then I'm probably more in the test or not that great camp rather than it's great. But I also feel like it's an optional thing, because it really depends on the candidate, right? Because I also feel like front end and back end, it's not really the same thing. Back end is you can still discuss concepts in both, but it's like the problem solving is just different. So what I at least try is we try and create this work environment kind of thing, where you actually discuss through a solution. But there I still think, again, for instance, some juniors, or if people are going from one front end framework to the other, and you're not really convinced based on the conversation that this person can do this stuff, then I would definitely consider something like a test. Let's say, I don't know, but this company, we use Vue.js, which I know is not the most popular framework in the universe right now. It's the React, right? So we get a lot of React developers, and a concern for me would be, I know there's overlap, there always is, but it's still different. So a concern would be that if somebody just comes in and says, that's not going to be a problem, I'm probably going to challenge that a bit. And if I'm not convinced in that challenge, I would probably consider something like a test, and it could be small. But yeah, that's at least just my take. But I would love to hear everybody else's.
Yeah, that's also where you want to assess their will to learn and their ability to communicate and their ability to absorb knowledge. So you might throw them into a field that they're not so known in one of these tests or in a conversation.
I would say we have the same, not maybe the same issue, but kind of the same. We do Angular. And Angular is, I mean, it's everyone wants to do React.
Different.
Yeah, exactly.
Why do you do that yourself?
Yeah, exactly. It's good for our company, I guess, but it's not everyone wants to work with it. But do you all agree that or do you agree that doing an assignment at home or like an assignment that you get sent home is better than doing something live in front of like a crowd in a sense, or like if you have an interview? So we actually do like a live coding kind of thing with our candidates in one step.
Yeah.
I have
But-
very
And we
mixed
got
feelings.
yeah, exactly. We got really mixed results like from people when talking to them.
Yes,
So
I also
I've
feel like
had
it's a
great
mix.
experience being interviewed like that, and I've had really awful experiences being interviewed
Yeah.
like that.
Yep.
So and it all depends as well about the relevancy of the task being presented. So I've interviewed for a front-end position where I was asked to create a linked list from scratch, the whole data type. And I don't see the relevance for that for me as a front-ender to be able to create a pop-up and send that. In the other camp, I've also been in another interview for a senior front-end position where I talked about all these frameworks that I've built and all the open source contribution I've done. And then I was asked to do a whiteboard exercise where I was to center a div. And I left with a really weird feeling from that interview, feeling like I don't really think you listened to me for the entire time.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings. I think it puts a lot of pressure on also the interviewer, right? Because it's also about creating the context. Because if you just throw out I mean, I would even be weirded out if it like say, hey, build a linked list. Because I mean, I'm not saying that that kind of problem doesn't occur in our code base, but usually there's some kind of we use Java, so that's built in. I don't know what you guys are using, but I'm pretty sure you can find one that already exists, and then you can Google how it works. It's not like something you encounter. So I prefer to, as much as possible, to create real life problems, and that's where the problem occurs, right? Because you can't really give them the entire architecture or the entire that's too much information, right? So you kind of have to see if you can find a piece or talk into problems. So talk into problems they've solved themselves, and then dive into that. Like, hey, how did you? If they are senior engineers, they've had experience with problems with other companies. How did you build X, Y, Z? But it does require prep, right, from our team, right? We're in the e-commerce space, so if somebody would interview us and they would be, it's still tech, but I don't know, something else where they do website builders, we would have to invest time in actually understanding where that person is coming from to ask interesting questions and take this discussion. Because then you can kind of preempt the assignment, if you ask me, and try and dive into the tough topics. And why did you do X, Y, and Z? Because as Raphael said, there's a million ways to do everything. So yeah.
And for me, kind of my experience with live coding interviews is that the candidates were often very stressed out, and they kind of blacked out even on the simplest stuff.
Yep.
And then it's counterintuitive for me because I don't know if you didn't answer it or you didn't do it because you don't know or because you're stressed. Then I don't get that much out of it. But I kind of compensate that with like, if we're not doing that, but we're doing a project, is then ask of different ways to do stuff on the project. And then you can see in real time kind of how they think about something or maybe solve it in a different way.
Yep.
I think for me,
yeah,
go ahead. I think for me, it very much matters that if you're going to do this kind of live coding kind of thing, it shouldn't be you writing some stuff on a whiteboard or on a computer or anything. It should be a topic that you discuss and talk about. I just had a flashback, PTSD from an interview I did many years ago at the start of my journey, where I was invited into this little startup. They were doing some Node.js stuff, and they asked me to implement a test framework from scratch while they were both standing right behind me.
Oof.
That was the most terrorizing thing I've ever tried. I'm almost getting like shakes now.
That's the thing. That's what people always say to me about live coding challenges. It's realistically, if you've got that job, when is that ever going to happen again? Where somebody just stands and watches you code? It doesn't replicate a real life situation.
I met very few people that could code, even if they when you get the job. Like even if you, I mean, if I walked up to an engineer, or even I started coding, people make so many typos when you stand next to them. It's crazy.
Exactly.
So even somebody who's been there like super skillful, super great, and then you stand next to them, and then you just keep be like, how can you not hit the keys? Like, how can you hit the keys that bad? Because people just get stressed by somebody glaring at their screen. So I think that problem is very real. So I would prefer discussing like problems or doing the whiteboard rather than live coding. Or I know people who do like pair programming stuff, but I don't personally have experience with that, because then it becomes maybe a bit more like it's taking versus like taking kind of the NXT out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we did that oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we did that at one assignment I had, where the whole process was basically touch and feel on the candidate, like culture fit in the first step, and then the second step was, or I think maybe the third step, I'm not sure. We actually brought in the candidate to the office, and he had to meet the team, or she met the team, had like joined the stand-up, and after the stand-up, they actually sat down and did like more programming for like 2-3 hours with the team on a like real production issue, or like fixed a bug or something, just to get a sense and feel for how it, and that was actually really good. I mean, it takes how do you say it? It requires a lot of time from the candidates. I'm not sure, like it's a tough ask to ask someone, like, can you come in for half a day, or like take time off from your regular job and come work with us for free, in a sense. But the like the evaluation was really good. You really got a sense for like how the candidate works, how it thinks, how it acts, how it communicates, and so I would say that that's probably the best from the company perspective way to assess candidates, but I'm not sure if it's actually the best for the candidate itself.
Yeah,
I've
I
been
think
on the other side as a candidate, and it was actually really pleasant as well, sitting half a day with the company I was interviewing for, because I got to see the culture that I would be working with in the future, that I wouldn't have seen through an interview with a hiring manager and 1 or 2 developers.
Yeah, everyone's always in best behavior in interviews, aren't they? So spending some actual real time with people, it gives you a real insight into what things are like.
Yeah, I had an experience like this as well, and I think it was pleasant. Like we even had the lunch together and all that. But as you said, like it's time consuming. So it's time consuming for the candidate, but also for the team and for you as well, because you gotta like take out a couple of hours for multiple people to kind of go through that. But I think what I didn't like about that process is there was so many steps. So it's not just that we went to the office, and that day was really pleasant, as I said, but there was so many calls, like with the CEO, with the CTO, and then meeting the team, and then I don't know, in the beginning there was like a couple of calls from the HR. So I think it took so long that I at one point I was like, if they asked me for another call, I'm not gonna do it, and that's it.
But I think the problem is real.
You gotta balance it.
Yeah, but I personally think that the problem is real, that people want like continuous meetings, because I feel like it's a lot of effort from the candidates. So this should probably be one of the final steps, if not the final step, right? It's like, okay,
that was the final step. So
exactly, because you should have assessed general like culture fit stuff, and like, okay, is this person interested in the company, and then you do this, I think, and then if it goes well, you are hired, in my mind, because otherwise it becomes, in general, personally, and I know that's a topic we have to talk about today, then I feel like we do maybe a phone screening and then 2 interviews, and the third one if we're really, really in doubt, but otherwise we try to keep it at that, to not waste like, also to put pressure on ourselves that we actually have to assess that, instead of it being like an ongoing process forever of, then a hire suddenly takes 4 months to do, just because you have to keep booking meetings, talking with all kinds of people. And yes, it could be if it's like if there's a lot of people are interested in the culture fit, culture, and it can be a lot of people in that room, and that can also be scary for the candidate. So it's obviously a balance. But yeah, I still feel you can do it in a pleasant way, or at least if you bring them out for half a day, right? It could be something during the day. You could just conduct it casually over lunch, if you know what I mean. So still not to make it an interview setting, but still, you could still ask, because the culture fit, culture add is more, personal questions and all this stuff. And some people, it's easier when you're over lunch instead of, with a desk between you in like a formal setting. But yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, Jamie, but I think that's one of the topics, right? Talk about how many steps you would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That was literally what I was about to say. So
Yeah,
you
sorry.
take it away, Peter. Take it away.
Yeah, sorry. No, but we have the same process as well. We do like phone screening, and then the first interview is kind of culture fit, and the second one is like a technical assessment. And then if we feel the need to, and that's both for the candidate and for us. Like if the candidate feel that they want to meet more people from the team, usually like the technical assessment is from someone from the team as well. So we like try to combine those two, but usually we have like a third one, which maybe more like a coffee or like you said, like a lunch or something. Just maybe a walk as well. Just walk and talk with someone from the team to get a feel of the candidate. But I think as well, like maybe 2 or 3 steps, maybe I think is the maximum as well. I mean, it depends, I guess. But I've heard some companies have like 6, 7, 6, 7 steps, and that like
unreasonable.
That's
Yeah.
too much. Yeah.
Yep.
I think 2 is too little, in my opinion. Like, I mean, you have the phone screening. I don't consider that like a part of the interview. This is just like a very basic filtering.
Yep.
Filter at the beginning, and then I would say it's very important to have an interview where you can assess the behavior and the culture fit and attitude and all that stuff. How the teamwork, how they work with others, how they present ideas, how they take rejection, how they give and receive feedback. All that stuff is super important. And then, like as I said, we kind of send them something to do at home. So they do that on their own time. We try to give them, like, if it takes, I don't know, if it takes like 4 hours, we try to give them a week to do it so that they can fit whatever time they available time they have. And then we have the discussion after that. And I think by that time, usually we have a pretty good idea if we want to continue with that candidate or not. And then it's up to kind of how it feels. Usually it's just enough. Like we have a final talk to iron out all the details and the contract and the negotiations and all that stuff. But maybe the candidate feel that they have more questions or they want to meet someone, or maybe we during that process figure out that there is something that like we really like the candidate, but there is something that we're unsure of. So maybe we'll book another kind of session to go through that. But that's
then
not a fixed.
So you're talking 3 or something, or just so I get it, is that like, is that your number, like 2 to 3 to 4, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, so the behavioral one, that's one. The take-home assignment, I mean, we can count that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and then the discussion, the technical discussion, and that's it. So 3, I would say, including the assignment, and then the final one is actually just ironing out the details. So I don't think it's part of the interview. Like we do that if we know that we want to hire that candidate.
Yeah, it's more like a phone call style thing than an actual meeting.
That's what I always recommend to clients when, if I work with a startup and they're still kind of finding their feet in terms of how to actually hire and interview engineers. That's the kind of process that I always go with is, a cultural phone screening, a chance for you to sell your business and your product to the candidate, and obviously a chance for them to understand what you're all about and to kind of understand if it's right for them as well. Obviously, these people are very in demand. They're going to have a lot of opportunities. So that's an important part of the process as well. And then the second stage, obviously, to be technical, whether that's that they come in and do, paired programming, do a whiteboarding session with the team, or do a take-home assignment. And then a technical follow-up where you get to, meet a couple of members of the team that you'll be working with and iron out any issues. But for me, I think that's kind of the pinnacle of like a recruitment process, is it covers all bases for both the candidate and for you as the hiring manager, from what I've seen. And that's kind of what I always try to recommend to people if they're a little bit unsure. So I don't know whether anyone's got any kind of advancement or maybe disagrees with that, but that's typically the route that I advise. I'll take that as agreement. I'll accept that. That's good.
Martin, how's at Lego? How many steps do you have, or like how does it look there?
We have 3 steps. So we have screening done by one of our recruiters for the first talk. Then we would sit down with the hiring manager and 1 or 2 members of the team to do a small screening, with technical screening, and tell the client more about what it would be like to work at Lego to more see the cultural fit as well. The recruiter usually does very well as well, but we would also like someone from the team to get involved there. And then we do this case study, depending, and we do that for all levels of roles. So it doesn't matter if you're a manager or if you're a designer or you're an engineer, whatever it is, you would always get this case study that we will base the third topic of. And sometimes it can be an assignment where you have to code something. Sometimes it can be a presentation that you do about a topic or similarly.
That's a really good point that you just mentioned there about the different options. That's something that I know a few companies do that, and I think if you've got the bandwidth and the capabilities to do it, that is the best way. Is to, you know, if a candidate passes the screening call and you're like, you know, I really like this person, really want to proceed with them, giving them the option of either being able to come in and do some live, you know, coding if that's what they enjoy, or if they'd rather do a take-home challenge. If you've got the ability to give people the option, that seems to go down really, really well from like a candidate experience perspective. Now, obviously, I'm not too sure how, you know, achievable that would be for any of you in your teams at the moment, but that is something that, again, from speaking to candidates, they seem to really like having the freedom to you know, do what suits them best, essentially.
I think that makes sense as well. Like, I think it does take out, like, because let's be honest, going to an interview is, for most people at least, like, you know, you get nervous and, you know, get there's a lot of honesty involved, right? It's like being at the exam to some degree. So if you can, you know, with that case study, take some of it out of it, or at least make people confident when they go into the room to some degree. I know they will. One is probably always nervous, regardless of what the case study is or the task is. But then you at least have something to start the chat with, which, at least in my experience, getting the candidate rolling, if you know what I mean, like getting, you know, is really what unlocks actually having a proper talk instead of it being like this exam question style, which
getting them comfortable.
Yeah, exactly, because it can happen. It just feels like an exam, right? Oh, what do you think about X? And then they reply like it's a drill rather than a conversation. I think that's super important that the interview stays as a conversation as much as possible, because just like nobody really looks over your screen while you code, it's not like we have exams, at least not here, but we talk about problems. It's a conversation, right, and a collaboration. So it's important to try and simulate that as much as possible.
Exactly, and I would also like to add that candidates who know this kind of get plus points instantly, subconsciously. Like when I find it easy to talk, like when I'm interviewing a candidate that's easy to talk to, that we just throw ideas together, like to each other's, and we discuss different approaches and all that stuff. I find it really easy to have a positive impression on them. And I kind of not overlook, but I kind of, if they lack on some other parts, then maybe we wouldn't kind of reject that candidate just because of that. Maybe set up a plan to kind of compensate for the parts that they're lacking. But like the most important aspect, I would say, is to approach an interview as a conversation. Because the candidates who don't do that, they're so stressed, they're so kind of tensioned. They think too hard because they're trying to give you the kind of the standard answer or the best answer possible. And then it's super hard for me as an interviewer to kind of figure out, okay, do you really know that stuff, or have you just taken a crash course before the interview and you're trying to kind of remember what that instructor said or whatever? It's very hard.
That's why you have all your follow-up questions.
Yeah. Sorry?
That's why you have all your follow-up questions, to dig a little deeper.
Yeah,
see if
exactly.
Our knowledge. I would like to add to your part about it being a conversation as well. What we did a lot at Selling Group was not doing these live coding challenges, not take-home challenges either, but we would prepare the client in the first interview saying, okay, this is a social interview. We see if you're a good cultural fit. The second interview is going to be a technical interview. We'll bring some of our engineers in and we'll have a talk about like maybe the basics of things. So if we knew you were a JavaScript developer, maybe you had a favorite framework that you liked, so we would tailor the questions into that framework so they were on a place where they felt comfortable and could answer it. And then we would go through step by step, more or less, a bunch of questions in each topic, TypeScript, JavaScript, their framework, Git or whatever. And then we will always give it this approach where if you don't know the answer, that's perfectly fine. Then we will tell you the answer. So when you leave from this conversation, you will have learned something. You would have gained something from spending your time with us.
That's so important. And again, it goes back to what you were saying before, Martin, and you, Nick, as well, about it being conversational. An interview should be a two-way thing. It's especially at a senior level, the candidate is, working you out as much as you're working them out. And there's so many instances I've had with previous businesses where a candidate has come away from an interview and goes like, I feel like I've just been, interviewed by like in a courtroom or something like that. They feel like they've just been grilled essentially for like 2 hours. And it's obviously not a nice experience for anyone. And that was one of the things I was going to come on to. We did briefly touch on it just then, but let's say, for example, somebody's gone through, a 2 or maybe 3-stage interview process and they've passed and they've been hired. When it comes to actually bringing that person into the team, what do you kind of feel, maybe from your own personal experiences as developers or managers, how should that person as a senior developer be onboarded into the team compared to someone who's maybe more of a junior level?
So at Helicon, we have something that we call Helicon Hell, which is actually a project that kind of have acceptance criteria and uses technologies that is very similar to the type of projects that we do. And then everyone does that, no matter if you're a junior or a senior. But the goal is not to finish it, but to kind of be exposed to how we do stuff, how we build projects, the technologies that we use, and the type of work that we do. So I think that's pretty good. But the problem with it that it takes, if it's a really junior developer, then it takes too long to finish. And then usually you don't finish them because you join a team and a project. But I think even if you don't finish it, you still get something out of it, which is really nice. Regarding like the difference between juniors and seniors on onboarding, I think like the thing with junior developers and engineers in general is you kind of focus on small stuff that's super clear and kind of closer to the code as possible, and that doesn't really need a lot of investigation. The more senior you go, the more concepts you discuss. So basically, when you onboard, you will say, we took this approach to build this and that. These are the big problems that we have right now. We have experimented with these solutions. We haven't yet settled on something, whatever. So in that direction. So then they can take that input and start thinking about maybe a different way or how we can continue with whatever we started with, or from a direction and a conceptual point of view, rather than just picking a task and doing it.
So something we're doing or have been doing for ages, I guess, is like mentorship, doing regardless if you're junior or senior, everyone gets a mentor. And I think that's really good in like, because even if you're a senior, you usually have to like understand our architecture and our tech setup, and like even though we're using like GRCP or Spring or whatever, we usually have like a wrapper or something. We have done something with it, so it's kind of customized. And I think it's good in that sense to have someone to talk to, and also I think one of the most important thing is to have a mentor is to know that you have someone you can ask. Even though like we have a really helpful culture and all that, and you can probably ask anyone anytime. My feeling or like the feedback I've gotten is usually people who are new are more afraid to like take time from other people. Even if you're like senior or junior, doesn't really matter. But to have someone who like this person is assigned to me and I can ask him for help, I think it's a really good way of getting someone on board.
Spot on. We do mentors as well at Helicon as well, and I just recently we had that same problem that you just mentioned about newcomers, especially junior developers being afraid to ask questions.
Yep.
And kind of occupy other people. So as you said, like having a mentor that they know they can safely go and take some time out of that person is super helpful.
Yeah, we also use it at Lego. We call them brickmates, and we make sure that that person is also having time allocated outside of his daily work. So we take off some of the workload that that person would normally have in order to make sure that there is time and resources to onboard the new people.
Yeah, we also like try at least like buddy or mentor or somebody that's like you go to, and like the senior especially start with. I mean, you go through also more the architectural stuff, where I think with a junior hitting them up with like, this is how all our databases function together is like a bit overkill from day one. Where if it's like a senior backend developer, there's a higher chance that they will actually follow along, right, and ask questions about it. But I also think it's key what you mentioned, Martin, in saying like it will be a velocity hit for whoever gets to be, you know, the buddy or the mentor or whatever on the team. I think that's I don't think you should underestimate that, you know, at least for some time, that, you know, this individual you have, which is usually also, you know, senior enough at least to answer all questions theoretically, obviously also have usually a very high like productivity level, and you can't expect that for some time. It depends on the candidate or the new hire, how long that is. For a senior, hopefully not more than some weeks, depending on how complex your system is. But yeah, it depends a lot on the person. And I think it's important not to put a timer on it, right? That's would be super stressful for the new hire. Like, hey, you have this guy in 2 weeks, and after that you're just on your own. Goodbye. Yeah, exactly. So but still try and assess as a leader or manager how long do you think that, you know, this velocity hit will be for? Like, it will be a month or even shorter, right? So yeah.
And that's really important, I feel, as well, from the existing team's perspective. I'm sure, you know, they're more than happy to help out. They've probably been in that situation themselves. But as I think it was Peter said or Raphael said, that it's really important that you kind of take away a little bit of their extra workload so that they're not becoming stressed and, you know, having to do extra hours. And then you may have a staff retention issue, which is a whole different episode, which we could probably go on about for hours as well. So yeah, really important that obviously you keep the balance between your current team and the new team members. Trying to keep everyone happy, which, you know, is the million dollar situation, I suppose. But you can always do your best. Just conscious of time and everything, I think we've covered kind of the main topics that I wanted to go through. But obviously, if anyone has any kind of extra questions to throw out there or anything else they'd like to bring up, then please do.
I think there's one part of the process that we haven't touched on, and that is the pre-recruitment, the defining of the job description and everything, because I think that is super important as well, to really tailor the description to the job. And it also helps you define the questions that you need during the interview process as well, because you deep dive into this description that basically is a requirement list or a wish list for you. Of course, you're not going to fill all of them at once, but you'll definitely have some questions that you, based on that you can probe into to the client during the interviewing processes. And I've seen other companies as well do interview or descriptions that are very generic, and it's a huge turnoff for the client. It more or less is the same as a client sending out 40 resumes to different companies that's barely tailored. I think that is very much the same resemblance.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, but I also think on that note that actually I see a problem is like in a preface, maybe think about actually the individual you want in the team. I feel like sometimes it goes, engineering is relatively well defined, but also for other roles, like what exactly is it we want this guy to do. Engineering is easy to detect when the requirements list becomes too long. At least I find that compared to maybe something new, but I think it's very easy to try and look for this unicorn of some kind of developer that can fix all your stuff at once. So I think that's also important before you actually, it goes into like the tailoring of the description, right? That you actually think actively about what kind of individual, what kind of skills are we actually looking for, instead of just a guy that can do everything and
exactly.
solve all our problems, sort of. Yeah.
You want to make sure that he ticks a few boxes, but not the full list, because that's going to be impossible, and it will definitely scare some people off. I think
Exactly.
last year I saw a job description for a front-end position that had like 15 different tech requirements of multiple years of experience in each of them. I was like, you guys are looking for a genius, and that person is definitely not me.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, like when it comes to like slightly larger companies, Martin, I'm sure you see this, and Peter as well, and everyone really, if you've got an internal recruitment team or you're working with an external recruiter, if you give them a huge list of technologies, they must have this experience. It's obviously going to reduce the talent pool massively. It also may put a lot of people off, like you were saying, and it may be a case that I'm sure you probably all agree that the best engineers are able to adapt to a technology based on what the task needs. So they're not just a React developer or just a Python developer. They can actually pick up different things based on what the task is. And if you're being really strict about exactly what you need from that person in terms of the tools and frameworks they've worked with, you're probably going to miss out on the very best people, because they're not just going to want to work with one technology for forever, essentially. So it is a really important part. And obviously, if you've got a really defined job description and a really kind of defined idea of what you're looking for, then it's going to make the interview process so much smoother, because you're not trying to work it out halfway through. It's something me and my colleagues were talking about before, and I think from everyone's perspective, that would make everyone's life so much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say on the other end of the process, I think maybe in the last call or meet, or maybe after, like when you start a new job, as part of the onboarding, I think it would be really nice to have like a clear expectations from that candidate, like in the next 3, 6, 9 and year, like 9 months and year. This is our expectations. And not that you hire someone and then 6 months goes by and then you have like, I don't know, a review, and then all the feedback then comes out then, and the candidate had no idea what expectations that the company had for him or whatever, and they might be on totally different tracks. So I think maybe as part of the onboarding in the beginning, it would be super helpful to everyone to just have like a sit down on the expectations, I'd say.
I completely agree, but I also think that you should be doing that for not only new hires, but for everyone. Obviously, new hires, the expectations are going to be a bit different. Some of the expectation will be like just figuring out where to get lunch. Where for existing hires is this, preferably they already know that. But yeah, really setting expectation and setting them up for success, and communicating what is expected, and because when you do that, you also communicate what is not expected, so to speak, right? So exactly. It's expected you can do this framework, then it's not expected that you, I don't know, something else you can do, right? Or hey, we expect you to understand the architecture within the next a couple of weeks or a month or whatever. Then we don't expect you to fix $1 million, right? So yeah, so I completely agree.
Definitely.
I think that we've also had quite good experience with is onboarding multiple people at the same time. So you have this small community of newcomers that can start together and discover the same challenges together and figure it out together. Yep. And having these sessions together as well, where you do some onboarding workshops.
Yeah, that is a massive thing. I mean, obviously, I've never worked as an engineer. I'm nowhere near smart enough. But even in any job, there's nothing worse than going into a 20-person office and on your own and not knowing anyone or knowing people very little. If you've got those 3 or 4 kind of starting buddies with you, it just makes the experience so much easier. Like you say, Martin, just to have people to kind of communicate and go on that same journey with you makes things so much less scary. So yeah, massively important, if obviously that's something that you're able to facilitate.
Yeah, I agree. But we like, and that's also, I guess, a different topic, talking about junior people, but having like a trainee program, for instance, that's I think one of the key benefits is you have like 5, 6, 7, 10 people starting at the same time, and getting bonded together as a group, and then you'll have those people within the company for like years and years that you can relate to and talk to and share experiences with them. I think that's super important. I think, as you say, you should probably do that with, or try to do that, I guess, with senior people as well, to try and connect the people if you have someone starting maybe approximately at the same time, even though you're not maybe in the same team or something, but I think it's important.
I have a related question to onboarding, but I mean, everybody knows that you get completely bombarded with information, and I mean, I guess bigger companies, you'll have like maybe even a week or whatever of just getting told stuff about the company. But how often do you actually proactively send people home, so to speak, like saying, you know, when you come in a new job, right, you get overloaded, and there might actually not be something to do after, I don't know, 2 p.m. or 1 p.m. or something like that. But I experience a lot that new hires, they then, you know, sit around. Again, it goes back to the expectations, right? But it's like, you don't have to be here from 9 to 5 the first week, or like, because there's literally, your brain is just getting fried from all the stuff you're getting told. So it's actually better and more efficient if you just go home and try and remember some of the stuff you've been told, rather than cram as much in as possible. But I don't know what you guys' experiences with this.
I definitely try to encourage people to do that as well. And
Yeah.
in general, I don't like seeing people work very late, so I try to encourage in general, not just newcomers.
Yeah, it's actually it's funny because I've been working flexible hours for so long now. Like I never really work 9 to 5, like or like on a rigid schedule like that. So I kind of forgot that this exists. And we had a junior developer joining, coming from a different industry. And then at 5, she was like, "Can I go home?" I was like, "Yeah, whenever you want." Yeah, but it's a good thing that you mentioned it, because like maybe it's good to set that like explicitly, especially if people coming from different branches or industries as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it comes back to what you were saying before about setting expectations when onboarding. Is, you know, look, this is your first week, you're going to be told millions of different things. So, you know, finish at 2 p.m. this week, and then we'll start, you know, normal hours next week. Because essentially you want them to be able to get off to the best start possible, because that benefits everyone. So, yeah, instead of kind of making them go home, you know, exhausted and full of information that, as Nick said, they're all going to forget anyway, it's probably better to kind of come up with that agreement beforehand.
Yeah. And I think in this beginning, maybe lunch is probably the most important event when you're joining a new team. Just, you know, because that's where you get social and get to know everybody, right? It's I'm not saying all the company information is not important, but lunch is definitely a key.
Usually you need like a recap of the company information like a year in or something, because
Yeah.
none of it sticks. So it's better to have it like a year later or somthing, because then
Within the
you're
announcement.
starting. Yeah, exactly. Because then like after a year you heard people talk about like legal market, who's that,
Yeah, exactly.
and then is when you should probably have it instead of like in the beginning. But
Yeah.
I guess it's good to have both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to bring up? Anything that we feel like we've missed at all? No, all good. Amazing. Well, we'll get it wrapped up, because, like I said, I'm conscious of time. I appreciate that you've all taken time out of your busy lives already to join this. But just obviously a massive thank you for coming along. I hope you've all got something from it that you can take back into your own careers and to your teams. I've learned a lot for sure, and it's something that obviously we're hoping to do again soon. So thanks a lot for joining, and I'll speak to you all again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot. Good to meet you all again.
See you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.